Well, welcome everyone to the 39 Gen podcast with Yosan University. And I actually have a really interesting guest with me today. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and what you do?
Yes. My name's Erica Bowman, and I'm an acupuncturist up in St. Helena, which is in the Napa Valley. And I'm a business
Yep.
owner and a single mama and just doing life up here in Northern California.
That's a good thing to be doing.
Yeah.
Now, I want to give some context for how I'm connected to Erica and why I invited her onto this show today. And first of all, she's an awesome human being and absolutely cool person and has such a great amount of wealth of information in this field. But there was something more personal to me that when I was studying in graduate school, I got sick and I was in LA and I had some type of viral heart infection that when I went to the Western doctors, they just told me to rest and that eventually I would feel better. And it wasn't like something that I was initially hospitalized for, but I went to see a cardiologist. He checked everything, said everything looked normal, and sent me home. But I felt horrible and felt everything was wrong. Eventually, got better slowly. And the only thing that helped me get better was some treatment at Yosan. And one of the interesting things is that the initial infection that I had actually started off with like swine flu. It was that year that swine flu swept through California. And then after the swine flu, I got really sick with normal flu symptoms. But then I had these horrible gastrointestinal symptoms. It felt like this cold knot had descended into my stomach. And it was a really weird feeling that I just felt that. And I would describe it to people, and especially to Western doctors. And I'm not hating on Western medicine, loving it. But it was interesting in this episode, I just wasn't getting answers. And I described this to people, and then the only people that were able to give me some answers were teachers at my school who says, well, it sounds like you have some type of cold pathogen that is lodged, and we need to treat that. And they worked with me through herbs, but I got better, but it was still lingering and stuck around. And I didn't think much of it. I was like, well, I'm feeling better. I moved up to Northern California to be closer to family. I was on a bit of a hiatus from school and moved up to St. Helena. And it was a really cold winter. And this pathogen came back with an absolute vengeance. I was in and out of the hospital there in St. Helena, just getting all of these tests done. And again, nothing showing up that was of significance, but yet I couldn't walk up a set of stairs. I felt like my heart was this big, and they were like, well, you know what? We just don't have answers for you. And I was in really bad shape, and they were trying to keep looking for what was going on. And one day I was, I just was like, I wish I was near my school again because I had professors there. And my mom said, there's an acupuncturist up the street. You should go talk to her. And I came into your office and we started speaking the same language. And I started describing things, and you were like immediately like, Sean, this sounds like Shanghan Lun. It sounds like that. And you started doing acupuncture for me and doing moxa. And we went through a series of treatments, and it like literally brought me back from a place that I was terrified of. And no one was able to give me any type of help. And I'll still say it, I think saved my life. I was in a place where I was in bad shape. And, when you hear about acupuncturists, now, especially so often in the field, people talk about doing pain management, going and doing facial acupuncture to really get a successful business and make money. But don't want to downplay that there are so many powerful ways that people can have an impact. And not all these stories are told. I know that there are probably hundreds of acupuncturists, thousands of acupuncturists out there that have these personal stories, but like people whose lives they've really touched and made a difference in. And you made a difference in my life, and dramatically so. And I wanted to bring you on and personally thank you face to face, but also to hear your story and how you got into this medicine, and how did you get started, and what was your calling?
So I began as a massage therapist, and I had a dog who was ill. And I actually took him to see Kamala, who was the woman that worked in the office where I was practicing as well. And I think you spoke with Kamala first. Um,
Yeah.
and she did amazing things for my dog. And she showed me points and she said, "You should go to school." And so I did. I went back to school and I had worked at an acupuncturist's office when I was in college and asked him to apprentice me. But he said, "No, you need to go to college. You get your master's first and then come back and kind of get the software after you get downloaded with all the information." So that was sort of my journey. And Kamala waited for me to finish school before she said, "Come work in my office. I work in the mornings, you can work in the afternoons, or vice versa." And we just worked it out. And she was amazing. She was like my angel because I'm on Main Street in St. Helena. And when I got your email, I had had a super terrible morning and you changed my day around. So that was a gift to me as well. I've been there for about 15 years, and both of my kids have been born while I've been doing acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And I've been on a path of classical Chinese medicine since pretty much I stopped going to school. Since I graduated from school, I kind of was working with Arnaud Versluw with his pulse diagnosis, and I got to go to China with Heiner Fruhoff, and um, I've been studying Chinate song for a long time too. So I kind of have a unique little office space where I only have one room and I spend all of my time with the person who comes in. So I do some Chinate song and I do a little bit of craniosacral work, and I stay with people and do moxa and talk about how to send them on their way and send them on their own healing journey by becoming empowered to do the things that they need to do at home. And I think that's really important.
It works because it worked for me, and I mean, I see that um, the power in I think that one thing that you touched on that I want to poke at, and like I said earlier when we were just getting started, I got to have Zev, this great acupuncturist down in San Diego, who is really big into the classics and he keeps talking about the wisdom of the classics. And he's like, if I could go back and do things again, if I had my own ability, he's like, I'd be teaching people straight from the classics, because there's so much knowledge there, there's so much wisdom. And that we when I when we approach it, it's just a worldview as well. That is something that you don't necessarily understand. Like right now, my daughter is dealing with a long-term cough that is just, it's this level of phlegm that is just sitting and stuck. And, my my in-laws were like, take her back to the doctor. And every time we go to the doctor, they're like, let's get her onto another course of antibiotics. And I'm just like, no, we're not doing that now. And so I was like, last night I sat down with my wife and I was like, all right, here's the plan. We're going to be doing some steam baths. We are going to be doing, sliding cups on her back, when she can, and adding in some of those spicy foods to start transforming that phlegm. And like we did round one, it was 2 days ago, and already it's resolving. And she was like, just like, wow, I can expectorate this phlegm now. I'm able to get this thing out. And she stopped coughing today. She woke up and there was no cough, and it was just because.
Wow.
But one of the things is, even still though, my in-laws are like, go take the go take the antibiotics, and that's kind of the knee-jerk reaction here is like a 3-day course of antibiotics. But yet last night we were getting ready to do a steam bath, and she's like, it's late at night, there's more wind at night, you should be careful about the wind. And there's just this understanding, a cultural worldview that is seeped into it. And that's one of the things that I've always loved about the classics, is that they are speaking a language that is different. And one of the things too, like when I was sick, and one of the things that I spoke to you about is that people would ask me, what are your symptoms? And I would literally say, I feel cold. Oh, you feel cold. Okay, are you chilled? I was like, no, I literally feel cold right along the Sanjiao and the gallbladder. My Sanjiao and gallbladder channels feel cold. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I don't feel cold here. I don't feel cold. I feel cold right along here and right along here. And you were like, all right, let's run with that. Then let's add heat to those lines. Let's add warmth to that. And then you would apply moxa. And it was like, I would feel great. And it was just, you have to be able to speak another language, and that language isn't necessarily our modern language of how we interpret things. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think that I would love to almost like infuse that into people more and more, because it's like the world outside is just like the world inside of us. And I know that's Chinese medicine,
Yeah,
right? It's like the fire and the water and the wind and the wood. And if people can really start to understand that, I think then things make sense. I mean, you see people when you start to
yeah,
talk to them about having certain symptoms that seem very separate. And then when you put them together with their Chinese medicine diagnosis, and it's like an aha moment. Like, you have fire that's
yeah,
flaring up and it's harassing your heart, that's why you can't sleep. And so just being able to step back, I think, and allow a different perspective. Some people are still very not wanting to accept that they have fire inside their body, or what are you talking about? Be able to explain Chinese medicine to people, because it's so fascinating and it's so rich. And then I also think that it's like the revolution that has to come next is one of taking our internal bodies and creating something that's beautiful, and then it will seep into the world outside. That's how we're going to
yes,
change the world outside. And so
yeah. It,
Chinese medicine is kind of the answer, being able to take back those old folklores that unpave those paths, or take out the weeds from those paths that have been blazed but they've kind of grown over again, and start moving cups on your kid's back and pounding on their chest when they're sick,
yeah,
and giving them esteem when they're sick. And then it feels really empowering too, because we don't have to go somewhere
yeah.
else and ask somebody, what do we need to do?
And one of the things too is, I think that I love that the inside can start to radiate outside. And I think that uh, um we are a small picture of the universe around us. And I mean, and one of the things that is the goal of whether it be Qigong or Tai Chi is an inner harmony, and when things are in fluidity, when things are moving, we have balance, we have health, we have wellness. And when things are stuck and stagnant, when things are not flowing, there is imbalance. And I think that we live in a very imbalanced world. If you look at just so much, there's this massive imbalance of yin and yang. You have this massive imbalance of disharmony of the elements in people. Culture, we are slamming into each other, when the beauty is that all of us are, the most powerful thing that any of us can find is that inner harmony, that harmony between the opposites in ourselves. And maybe then we can start to radiate that outward, because that inner health is reflected in the world around us. And that's Taoism, and that's like one of the fundamental concepts of
Yes.
studying Chinese medicine. You have to understand some of these concepts. I was reading Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao Te Ching yesterday, and just was like, have to dive back into that every now and then, just to kind of remember the way. And then I was teaching my daughter about the I Ching, and she was just like, what is this? This is awesome. Where do these answers come from? She's like, there's no microphone here. You ask this question, then it like pops up. How does it do this? But it was this idea, and she's like, oh, hang on, it was this answer then, and now it's this answer now. Why do these answers change? And I was like, because that is the nature of the Tao. It is always flowing. It is
Mm.
always changing. But again, being able to share this unique and beautiful worldview is such a special thing. And one of the things that I really love is I feel like people are becoming more open to it. Have you experienced that at all? Seeing that there is more of an openness to some of these concepts?
Yes. I think that in definitely my parents' generation, there was a giving over of power when it comes to your doctor or whoever you're asking information from. And I see that things have shifted a lot. And even in the people who are walking into the office, sometimes it was the last resort. And then sometimes people are just curious. But more and more, I think people are believing in the idea of the ancient medicine and believing in the idea that they do have personal responsibility for taking care of our own health. And I think that opens people's minds a lot.
Yeah, totally. And I think that you look at the collective wisdom of Chinese medicine. Like, it is several thousand years of information that's been gathered, and it's like, it's just amazing to think about the amount of time and information, and just all of these people who collected these case studies, and who saw these things, into action. And you are an inheritor of a grand legacy, and there is this long passage and transmission of information downward. And I think one of the most beautiful things for the people that are looking to get into the field is that you are the next step, and it will keep going beyond you. You are going to be one new evolution of this medicine, and to see where it goes. But it's a beautiful thing.
It is. And I think it's really lovely because then we have the opportunity, like you do, to pass it on to your daughter. And it's like
Yeah,
now your daughter, right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
She's 8.
8 years old.
Yeah. So my son is 11, and they can speak our language, and sometimes they push it away, but there's definitely that little spark in there that they know about. And I think it's something that they will continue to be able to return to as well. And so the more people know and understand just the basics of Chinese medicine, I think the more that things can move in that direction where people can start to take responsibility and pass that on and understand that what's going on outside is also going on inside. And then what's going on inside
Yes,
is reflected in each of our worlds outside, too. It's
totally.
amazing.
And I think that It is amazing. It is amazing, and it's amazing that we have this opportunity to be part of the change, to be part of the change of a rediscovery of our true nature, you know, and that there is this deeper understanding, and you know, and I have no problem with them studying the science of it. I'm sure there are great explanations that they can find, and yet at the same time, it doesn't take away from the richness of the original language. It doesn't take away from the richness of the, you know, discussion of the different evils, the discussion of the different, you know, pathogenic factors, however you want to label it. It's still applicable, and it's still, you know, really, and for people that are listening that are unsure about it, it works. You know, it's practical. It is, and this is one of the things that one of the people that came onto the podcast, and she's a specialist in facial acupuncture, but she said this great thing. She says people will come in to get facial acupuncture, and then afterwards they might be a couple sessions in, and they're just coming in for whatever at that point in time because it feels good, you know. And you treat here, and then you treat here, and it's like there becomes this openness to, well, I'm just coming in because I feel better, you know. And it's like, however they're coming in and showing up, they're coming in and they're coming back, and you have the chance. And there was this one thing too that one of my professors was speaking about yesterday. You might have been the first person to physically make contact to some of these people in years. There might be that when you are doing palpation, this might be the first time that someone has actually had a kind touch in 15, 20 years. And this might be the most healing thing you can do, is to sit there and put your hands on the person and say, welcome to this healing space, you know? And because
Yes.
not a lot of people give that to themselves as well, you know?
No, and I think that that's something that also was really reiterated to me during COVID, because I used to always joke with people that if everybody meditated and stretched, nobody would need to come see me. And I used to joke and say that to people when they came in. But once COVID happened and there was no more personal contact for the month or month and a half that I was closed, I realized that that is the most important part. I mean, I've had people come in who
Yeah.
have had stomach things and nobody ever touched their belly. And it's wild.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. And I do think that personal touch and contact is one of the most important things. And getting people into that space where they feel very relaxed so that then they can heal.
Yeah. There was this great story. I got to meet. I was up at PUC, Pacific Union College, is up the hill from St. Helena, and I remember my mom. My mom is a therapist, counselor, and she was part of. She was telling me that there was this great speaker that was coming in. His psych department brought up this professor, Robert Sampolsky, and he is the world's leading expert on stress. And he
Mm.
came to talk to this school, and there was a lot of other international experts there because he's a big deal. He is the guy on stress. And he started talking about how when stress is introduced to an animal, what they found. And one of the things they found was that you take animals, whether it be a baboon or something else, and they introduced stress, and these animals started developing very human conditions. They started getting heart disease, they started getting cancers, they started getting these other things that they were not seen in wild populations. For an hour and a half into this lecture, everyone in the room is sitting there absolutely depressed. Everyone's got this look on their face like, this is great, we're all going to die,
Yeah.
you know, because everyone in that room is stressed. Everyone in that room is overloaded, and they're like, okay, I can't handle this anymore. And finally, I'm just sitting there in the back. I'm one of those people that will always raise my hand even when I'm not supposed to. I raise my hand, and at that time I was on a big yoga kick, and I was like, I said, so I'm really terrified right now, feeling like I'm going to be dying from something shortly. But what happens if you remove the stress? And then his eyes lit up. He got excited. He's like, you remove the stress, and the animals start to heal. the heart disease starts to go
Mm.
away. The cancer starts to go into remission. He's like, these conditions start to resolve themselves when you remove the stress. He says it's amazing. It's like almost like magic. Like you put this animal back into a peaceful, stress-free condition that it's supposed to be in, and their bodies start to heal itself. And so again, I was like, I raised my
Mm.
hand again. Everyone's like, people are elbowing me, like, shut up, Sean. And I was like, no, I paid to come here. So by one chance to talk to this famous scientist, I'm going to talk to this man. And I was like, so
Yes.
is yoga the answer? Is it yoga? And he's like, no, it's unique to everyone. He says, yoga's great. He's like,
Mhm.
do not downplay the effects of yoga. Yoga is phenomenal. It is a great and powerful de-stressor. But you take some guy who is a mechanic who's worked for the past 50 years of his life and you put him into a yoga class, it might stress him out. You know, it might make him feel good. It might stress him out. You don't know. But you take that same man and take him fly fishing and suddenly his stress levels drop because for him it's the fly fishing. And he says, so one of the things that's really important is that you have to find the things that are sustaining for you. You know, for my brother, his thing is mountain biking. He lives in that valley. He goes up in mountain bikes and he finds this intense feeling of de-stress. But of course, obviously yoga is great because it opens up the meridians. Meditation is great. But one of the things is too, and I one of the things that I find so important is that we are kind of a peace bringer. You bring to and like what is my wife was like, why do you have to put the needles in me? And I was just like, because I'm anchoring you to the table. And you
Mm.
can't pick up your phone when you got the needles in your hand. And like literally, it's like I'm anchoring you into your body right now. And then she's like, she started cracking up. She's like, that's a great way to put it. And I was like, you know
It
what? I think some
is.
of us need to be anchored into our body. You know, you're anchoring
Yeah.
them down so they can't pick up the phone, they can't run around the room, they can't look at anything. And I'm anchoring you into a moment of peace. And
Yes.
it sounds funny, but you know what? It kind of is applicable. It kind of is real, you know?
Yes, I think it's so true, and I it's a great way of putting it because I do sometimes think about what I do and I'm like, I put needles in people for a living. It's so strange. But another piece that I think is super incredible about stress is how powerful our minds are. And we don't
Yes.
give enough credit to like the visualizations of things and the way that we speak to
Yep.
ourselves and the way that we are thinking about things and believing that things can change. And that's the little magic too, you know, that magic of
Yeah.
if I visualize my breath going into my little tiny toe, guess what? It goes there. And those are the
Yeah.
things that sometimes I think we can aha people with, and also help them get into their bodies a little bit more and take that nervous system down a notch and start to chemically
Yeah.
change things almost immediately. And so the anchoring into the table is like you have a little audience that can't go anywhere for a little while. And I think that's beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things too, and I think that one of the things you pointed there is the people will come in. And I had a professor in university, and he sat down and we were on a kick. You know, should we get everyone to stop all of this and stop all of this? And you know, he's like, and he looked at us and he's like, life is tough. You know, when your clients come to you, life is not always easy for them. And one of the most important things that you can do is to be a hope bringer, to bring them,
Mm.
you know, and some positivity that you can be a person that um, I'm going to give an example that is not fully Chinese medicine related, but is a perspective relation, a shift. One of my family friends, a family member, actually, one of my wife's family members, felt a lump up here. She went to the doctor. you have a type of stage 4 lymphoma. And the doctor, this is what the doctor said to the mother. He looked at her and she says, "You have 2 kids, right?" And she says, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Good, because this one's not going to make it." And the girl's sitting there in the room, and my wife called me and said, "This is what was just said." And I said, I said, "I'm not giving you medical advice. I haven't seen this patient. Never go back to that doctor again. Find a new doctor, get a second opinion, go and find someone who's willing to give this person hope." She went in,
Wow.
she had a new doctor. They operated immediately. She got treatment. She did all of the different things, Western and Eastern, she could, and she's beating it. She's in remission. She's been in remission 6 years. You know, you need
Wow.
people who can give you hope. You need people who are an ally. You need people that are part of your team. And we have a system that's built up that doesn't necessarily provide people hope. And I am not going to slam Western medicine. I believe that there's a whole new generation of doctors that is getting better training at patient care and getting better training at giving people hope as well. But I think so many of one of the things that, with the focus of Chinese medicine on the internal and external, the power of emotions, the power of our breath, and that's one of the things I loved about training in school, is when I had to go do my own Qi cultivation classes, when I had to go do these meditation classes, when I had to go take Tai Chi. And a lot of my classmates are like, "What does this have to do with anything?" And I was like, and I was lucky enough to see it early on. It has everything to do with everything,
Yes.
and one of the things for my daughter, my family was like, "I'm taking her to jujitsu class." And they're like, "Why is she going to jujitsu class?" And I said, "Because it's strengthening her chi. It is strengthening the wei chi. It is strengthening her overall constitution, and it is important to do these things to build." And they were like, "Well, we don't understand it, but it's been working. It's part of the program." I'd love to hear
Yes.
your feedback on that.
Yes. Oh, I think that it's so important. And I mean, I feel like I often will go to a doctor and be hopeful that there's something that will come about that is an aha for me. And I respect Western medicine like crazy. I recently had strep throat
Yeah.
and I took antibiotics for the first time since I was 22, and I had strep throat then. And there is a time and there is a place for it. But I also think that
Yeah.
that same sort of idea of giving the power away and being able to take
Yeah.
that power back. And I think that doctors are learning more and more that they need to have a really great bedside manner, and they need to be kind to people and to be able to explain to people
Yes.
what's happening and be able to um, give that hope, because there's so much in this world that is not physical and not tangible. There's so much that we cannot
Yes.
see. In fact, my teacher says 90% of things in this world are intangible. And so sending your daughter to
Yes.
jujitsu is like part of that intangible building of her body and building of her internal will and building of her heart strength
Yeah.
and all of those things that maybe it's hard for somebody else to see, but I think those are the powerful things that we slowly begin to infiltrate and bring to the table. And I do think that Western doctors are starting to learn that as well. And it's a beautiful thing. It's like them finally learning about nutrition and having clients come in and
Yeah.
say, "Oh, my doctor gave me um, this statin, but they're also having me take CoQ10." But that didn't happen years ago. So there are
Yeah.
things that are moving and shifting, and it might feel really slow sometimes from our perspective of bringing those two forces together, but I think that the spark is definitely there. And I think that there are a lot of neurologists out there who say all you have to do is breathe and it will de-stress you. And for somebody who is a Western medical doctor, that might be like, what? You can't just breathe your way out of anything, but maybe you can. And I think that those are
Yeah.
the little sparks of things that are happening that are definitely changing the way that people are starting to think. And that's the beauty that I find too.
And one of the things too is like I try to remind people that just because you don't understand something doesn't mean that it's not true. And it doesn't mean that we won't find out a truth for it at some point in time, because when I talk about chi, when we talk about energy, when we talk about these things, some people will be, you know what? That sounds kind of like, if you go back in time 1,000 years, or maybe let's say 2,000 years, and I say, you know what? This stuff, gravity, it exists. Like, you know, I can't see it. How do I know it's there? You don't have to understand everything for things to actually work. The
Yes.
forces of movement. Just because I'm not Isaac Newton doesn't mean that these things, the laws of thermodynamics don't exist. They do. It's just because we haven't always explained everything, and there's a realm, there is a place for um, that. Just because you don't have a clarity for everything doesn't mean that tools don't work. And I think that what I tell people too is that come to this, meet it, listen, try it, feel it, see it. And if it doesn't work for you, then I wish you a most beautiful day. But I promise you, you're going to feel better.
Mm,
You're going to feel better on the other side of this.
yeah.
And if you don't, then I love you anyways. But I
Right.
promise you, you probably will.
Well,
And the thing is that I go ahead, go ahead.
one of my teachers, Gilles Marin, he's my Chinate song teacher, and he talks about metaphysical, and everything is metaphysical. I mean, if you think about
Yeah,
our thoughts, they are not really real. They're virtual. And the only
right?
thing that's really
Yeah,
real is what we're feeling inside, and we can't rationalize any of our feelings. I mean, sometimes we can. We can say we feel that way because, but there's no real explanation for the reason why some feelings come up. They're just there. But that's inside of our bodies,
yeah,
and that's more real than anything. And so I think pulling
yes,
people into their bodies is so critical because we're often in our minds and thinking about everything in life rather than just being present. And that pulling of people inside their bodies and getting them anchored to the table and feeling what they're feeling in that moment is sometimes something that people have just never experienced before. And it's so important.
yes,
I mean, before there were gods and demons, and that's why people got
yeah,
sick, and but there are things, I mean, you could call them, the viruses are like the demons, and there are
yeah,
explanations for things that have come about that we've learned scientifically. And I do say that to people sometimes. I talk about chi and I say, if that's too strange for you, then think of it as your blood flow and the oxygen in your blood.
yeah,
Because, right, if there's no chi, then the blood just sits there. And so the chi is actually what's moving
yeah,
the blood. So if you're breathing and your oxygen is getting there, then there won't be any stagnation. There won't be things that are stuck. And so I think that we're starting, like
Yeah.
you said, to have those little pockets of, oh, nitrous oxide is released when we put the needle in, and that dilates your blood vessels and brings blood flow to the area. And so we can sort of start to grapple with all the people who are very logical and want something very concrete when they come in and see us. And then you get them on that table and you start to get them into their body. And then, yes, they just feel better. And it's so
Yeah.
wonderful.
There was this great movie a couple years ago, Spirited Away. Did you ever see that?
No,
It was the Hayao Miyazaki movie. Oh, it's great. Won an Oscar for the best animated film.
nice.
And it's this little girl who journeys to the spirit realm. Her family inadvertently takes a wrong turn, and they drive to the spirit world, and they walk across this bridge. And there's this one character called No Face, and No Face is my daughter loves it, and she has little and No Face stickers all around the room. I can't show it to you right now, but I'll pop up a picture for the podcast.
I
But
love
it's
it.
interesting because this character comes into the bathhouse and he starts getting sick. She ends up in this bathhouse, gets a job, stays there, and all these different characters come through, and it's just really a great movie, so beautiful and so many symbolisms. But this one character, No Face, starts eating all these different characters. He starts eating these people, and just he becomes like. And the interesting thing is, like, the analogy is, it was greed. It was this desire, and when desire gets things, it just feeds it more and more. And so this girl gives No Face. This little girl gets a piece of medicine from one of the river spirits, and the river spirit gives her this really powerful, like, Chinese medicine, herbal medicine, and so she gives it to this guy. He eats a piece, and he starts vomiting out all of these different people until he returns to normal. And one of the things that I'm always, there was this great book that I read on channel theory ages ago, and there was a quote in the beginning from one of the classics, and I don't remember the exact quote, but it's like, even the most difficult knot, because our lives, we are like a knot. You take the, I mean, and now up in the Bay Area, you have more of these Silicon Valley type that are dealing with stresses that I couldn't even comprehend. So dealing with just layers and layers and layers of stuff that just gets wrapped on. And how do you work with that person? But all those layers, you get one needle into the right place. You get in and you start treating that center point, that point where the knot is originated. Everything releases.
Hmm.
Everything can unfold. You have the ability to be the person who unties the knot when everyone else is treating the fact, they're treating the fact that this person's tripping and falling down because there's all these strings dragging everywhere. But you can be the person who can untie the knot. And that's the beauty of this medicine, is that if you do your diagnosis correctly, if you look at the people, if you do you really focus in on proper diagnosis, you can figure out where is that knot tied, and to be one of the people, maybe the only person, who really starts untying the knot. And maybe that knot's been there a long time. Maybe it takes some time. But you have the power to do that. You have the tools to do that. When everyone else is looking at the symptoms, you're looking at the cause.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of Chinese medicine for sure, is that root idea of getting to the bottom of what's going on and hopefully having um, enough of a proper presence to allow people to come to that knot themselves and
Yes.
understand, and understand what really is going on in my life, in my body, that needs to shift a little bit. And how can I believe that my body has the ability to heal? Like, I'm constantly saying
Yes.
that to people, your body wants to heal, or asking, do you
Yeah.
believe that your body has the ability to heal? Because I do, it's like our bodies are constantly shifting and changing, and those spots that are tightened up don't feel like they want to be there either. It's not the best energy usage of our bodies either. And sometimes it's really just the space, I think. Or, like you said, putting hands on people. And then for that moment, they can sink in and understand what their own piece is that needs to start to loosen. And then giving
Yes.
people tools that they can use when they go home to slow down when they eat, or decide
Yeah.
not to drink ice cold water because it's your body's
Right.
cold inside already, and so you're adding cold to it. Does that really make sense? And I think
Yeah.
that it is one of the most beautiful things. And like I said, pulling those symptoms together that people come in with, and they're like, oh, yeah. And then there's this, which is kind of out in left field, but I don't know, I'll just tell you. And then it's like, oh, that totally relates. And it actually puts the puzzle pieces all together. And then there's the
Right.
diagnosis right there. And it's so exciting to me to see new people all the time because of that.
And to remember the magic. I remember when I was in school, one of my classmates, I was like, well, where are you going to school? And he's like, dude, this is Hogwarts for me. And I was like,
Yes.
what? He's like, yeah, I have to reframe that. He's like, every time I'm in herbs class, I'm in potions. Every time I'm in, acupuncture class, it's defense against the dark arts. And I was just like, and he gamified it. And it was his awesome way of looking at that. And I was like, what are you talking about? But then last night when I was doing cupping for my daughter on her back, and I was doing running cups, and she's had this cough for, a while, and nothing was getting red except for the spot right near where the lung points were.
Mhm.
Right up there was all this redness coming up. And my wife was like, why is it only red right there? You're going up and down. And I was like, she's like, that's the wind, right? That's the wind that's stuck in there. And I said, yeah, that's it. And some people might say that, oh, you're doing you know what? Have that magic. Pay attention, because you know what? I've seen that happen so many times that it's not it's not just luck at that point in time, where you get a person who's dealing with liver cheese stagnation, and you do some cupping on them, and why is it that liver point is the spot that all the redness is coming up?
Yes.
it there is magic in our world. Can you see it?
Yes.
And can you give yourself permission to be you know someone's Harry Potter
I
or
totally
Snape
agree.
because he was rad?
I totally agree. And it's funny because when I explain to people moxa, because I do use moxa a lot, and I say it's the herb mugwort, and it's like they look at me kind of funny. I'm like, it's in the Artemisia family. I know, it sounds like we're in Harry Potter. So I use that analogy too. And I do think that magic, like putting a little magic into our days every single day, is what feeds that beauty and that mystery and that feeling that anything is possible. And so my kids always laugh at me, but I'm constantly doing things like saging the house. And then sure enough, they'll come
Yeah.
around and they'll do it too, or
Yeah.
we need to move out of this house and we need to find a new one. So we're going to clear this space. And when we clear it, then something will open up for us. And we're constantly having
Yeah.
things like that happen in our lives. And I do believe that that magic is another of those little metaphysical pieces that, as we start to believe in it and feed it, it continues to grow. So I love the magic analogy.
If you could go back and dive into any part of this medicine again, what would you love to learn more about? What would you love to kind of throw yourself into a bit more?
I am super interested in chinate song. I'm super interested in the abdominal diagnosis, and I've been reading the Hara diagnosis by Kiko Matsumoto and Stephen Birch, and like going back to
Yeah.
some of those old amazing masters that know how to just hone in on one spot in the belly and get to that knot and start to unravel things. I believe in that feeling of when there's stress put into the body that it holds on if we don't digest that emotion or that stressor, and that it kind of gets caught in the fascia, and it seems to be
I
caught
believe
in the
that.
fascia that's surrounding the intestines a lot, because we don't really feel our digestion necessarily, usually, unless there's something wrong. And then eventually those pieces of fascia start to create a knot that then pulls on the hip, and all of a sudden you've got hip pain or shoulder pain or something else going on. But it really feels to me like it's at the center. So when you were talking about the Mingmen fire, I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing, because I feel like I want to go in there sometimes and like lift people's small intestines up and switch them all around so that they're moving nice and lovely and waving like waves in the ocean. So I think that would be
I
the
love that.
place that I would want to go.
Wow, you're speaking to the choir. I, I'm super excited about learning more about that. But one of the things that you poked at there, I just wanted to comment on. I've heard, I've done yoga for a long time, but I took a break and then I'm getting back into it. One of the things that's interesting for me is that as I will get into a pose and a new pose, and I'm moving into a position that I've never done before, I'll suddenly have a memory that pops up, and I just go, hey, that must be some either, and it's not always a nice one. Sometimes there's like some sort of trauma memory that pops up, and I'm just like, wow, I must have been storing that in that space. And so I do think you're so spot on with that. We store those traumas in the fascia, we store things in that, in our gut. And you know what? And again, we get to be the people who can help, use our magic to unwind that.
Yes.
So I love being a little Harry Potter. I never got my letter from Hogwarts, but I did get my letter from my acupuncture school, so that's pretty
That's
pretty
pretty
pretty damn good
close.
for me.